Parlour pours where the stories flow. Whiskey warms as the embers glow. From cask to glass, from past to now, we sip, we laugh, we raise a vow. Parlour Pour.
Welcome to Parlour Pours here in Mother Mac's Public House, and we are sitting at the bar counter in Peggy's Whiskey Parlour with an exceptionally good friend of ours, Séamus Óg, all the way from Echlinville Distillery. Welcome.
How's it, farm boys? Thanks for having me.
So I suppose, we've given you the brief concept of what we are and what the Parlour Pour is, right? So he's here in the hot spot now. He's a little bit nervous, but we'll get through it, right?
He's in between the two of us now here. There's no getting away.
There's no getting away this time, right? So we were
warned about a thump to the ribs already.
Yeah, we're going to ask him all difficult questions. But I suppose, why not start it off quite simply? I mean, share the story with us of Echinville Distillery, and I suppose what makes it unique in terms of the Irish whiskey landscape?
I suppose Echlinville, again, basically the guys have been involved for, it's one of the older distilleries in the country, even though it is, only 12 years old this year. I suppose when we opened up, started distilling in 2013, I think we were the 7th active distillery in the country. We're now up to 52, so we've been there for quite a while, and it's the first farm distillery in the country, single estate whiskey of our own and everything else. So there's a few really nice little points about Echlinville Distillery being down in the Arts Peninsula too. So Echlinville is brand new. It's named after the manor house. That's Shane, the independent owner of Echlinville Distillery. Yeah. We purchased the Echlin House, Echlinville Manor House. It was named after Robert Echlin that lived there years back. So it was only, we built the distillery on site, and his family farm, the fields that the barley's growing in, surrounds the house. It only made sense to, refer to the distillery as Echlinville.
Just, I suppose, you're the third person we've had on the Parlour Pour, right? Not exactly going to be the third episode. We'll see how that works out, depending on how much editing is required. But I mean, what brought you, I suppose, number one, into the hospitality industry, number two, into the bar industry, and then number three, where you are right now with Echlinville in terms of the whiskey industry?
Yeah, I suppose with a lot of people within hospitality, if you're not born into a family that has the pub and the rest of it, it's an accidental thing. Like, turned 16, got the national insurance card, and started working a part-time bar job. Fell in love with it. Was very heavily involved in cocktails and sort of managing cocktail bars for a few years. But within that, was always very focused and very fascinated with Irish whiskey. To the point where a few different brands were sort of hiring me in to consult and do events and create sort of drinks for them and stuff like that. So again, the love was always within Irish whiskey and using local stuff where possible. I suppose I was probably only 18, 19 when I met Joe McGowan, iconic ambassador up in the north, looks after all the Middleton stuff, and when he's coming around the bars doing the trainings and tastings and the knowledge he had, that was, to me, I was like looking at it thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to promote Irish whiskey. I want to fucking travel the world with it, which is the big perk of the job. But I suppose Echlinville, I sort of had a few different offers came across the table, and none of them just felt right. For me, it was, if you're going to spend 60-70 hours a week talking about something, you have to believe in it, you have to be a fan of it yourself. And I was lucky enough, got the lads from Echinville approached me about being the first ambassador at the distillery, outside of, I suppose, Jarlath being a self-proclaimed ambassador but accountant at the same time. So yeah, the role was sort of there to shape in the way, the direction I wanted to, so couldn't have had a better opportunity at a better time.
I suppose give us an insight maybe into what's like an average week. And I know it's a difficult question, there's no such thing as an average week, but what's a week in the life of a brand ambassador for Echlinville?
I think this week comes up with me being with the company for 3 years, so like there hasn't been the same week twice. And like just in January there, I've actually got a bit of a promotion to National Sales Manager for Ireland, so but within that still looking after all the ambassadorial stuff for the company. Like, this week I was in Galway last night and here tonight. Next week I'll be in Donegal and Dingle, both doing tastings and meeting with wholesalers and everything else in between. And if your whiskey shows, if your trade talks, your sales pitches, there's a lot to it. And of course spending plenty of time down at the distillery and in the warehouse and the still house with the team and understanding just what it is that we're the message we're trying to get across to the wider world.
What is that message?
The message is the best whiskey about. The message is whatever Jarlath Watson tells you it is. That's his gospel down there.
I looking up on the internet, the internet tells me that Echinville was the first distillery to be granted a license in over 125 years. Is the internet lying to me, or?
No, so that would be in the north. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it would be in the north. I suppose I'm not even sure what the last one to have been granted beforehand was, but obviously, times have changed. Even down to the fact that computers came into play. There was no sort of system or application form really in play whenever the guys went about getting set up. So it was a bit of a dragged out process from what I've been told, and the fact that a lot of records and research had to be done to figure out what actually was needed and required.
And I suppose, what challenge does it present being the first in so long? Because you're seen as the new kids on the block. You're brand new.
I unfortunately wasn't there from day one, but I know Jarlath and Shane will tell you stories about it all day long. But I know the one that really I think's pretty cool was with ourselves having the two large column stills we have in the middle of the distillery for producing our vodka, and we run the gin through it. The first time the guys actually distilled vodka from scratch, up to 97%, and logged that in the HMRC forms that month. I got a phone call from them saying you've recorded here, you've made a mistake, you've produced vodka from scratch. Nobody in the north has facilities to do that. That's not a thing. And we got the phone call. We sort of said to them, you can come down and look at the stills if you want. This is the equipment we're working with.
Yeah.
So it's being the first to do quite a few different things, which is really cool. And thankfully the guys have had good friends in different distilleries and across the country that have been fit to offer advice and everything else and help out.
Yeah, and I suppose you mentioned kind of we glossed over. We didn't pick on it. I mean, the whole grain to glass. process. You're growing your own barley. You're obviously malting it and then using it to produce your own spirit. Maybe walk us through that a little bit, because that's quite important.
Oh yeah, that's massive in the Echlinville story. We don't really talk on it as much with Dunville's, but as we're bringing out Old Cumber this year, you'll hear a lot more about it being our own pot still. But I suppose both Shane and Jarlath both coming from farm families down the Ards Peninsula, and we have that beautiful barley down there. The heritage grain that it used to be back when the old Ards maltings were in the go, which we've also acquired to try and revive the whole story. Sow, grow, harvest, mash, distill, everything all happening on site. From the fields ploughed till the whiskey goes onto a pallet. For our own stuff, everything happens within Echinville estate, which is lethal. There's
and
not too many.
That's been from day one.
From day one.
Wow, that's
from day one. So yeah, again.
I'm actually shocked. To be fair, I'm actually shocked, because it was only when I started doing a little bit of research that I realised this was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it does on your website. It does say it very clear, and it is there as in bold writing. But it's something that someone even in the industry, I didn't realise this until the last few days.
It's a funny one. Echinville, it is out of the way. You're about 45-minute drive outside of Belfast, and nobody really wants to drive to the distillery because you won't be drinking whiskey when you're there. So not as many people are familiar with the site, and honestly, I would encourage everybody to take a visit up at some point. Or between Belfast Whiskey Week and different events that are on, there'd always be bus trips from the city heading out. Where we do warehouse tastings and that. But as you come in the main gates, you come up the laneway up towards the manor house, and you've barley fields to your left. You're seeing it as soon as you come in the gates of the distillery. You're seeing that process taking you along by the still house where the liquid's being produced, and then down to the warehouse where it'll rest.
So given that you're actually growing your own barley, what role does terroir play within Echinville, with the industry, or is this something do you kind of push?
We're conscious of Waterford here, right? Does anyone from Waterford listening? I know things aren't so good at the moment, but terroir will be careful.
I'm going to pass the buck on to Jarlath on this one. For remember, he said it. I think it was maybe the Aviator Society. He was with the company a couple of months, and I went down with him there, and he put it quite nicely, but also in a way that I was sort of Jesus, can you be saying that? Where he was we're not going to preach about the terroir and all this in the different fields across the thing, and he says we're not terroirists. And I was like, fucking it was the
that
best.
Sounds like a t-shirt or a t-shirt, yeah.
That was the best, worst joke he's ever made. But I suppose the way he looks at it and the way we all do is, you'll notice a difference in Echinville barley year on year, as in what that year was like weather-wise and everything else. But Echinville's on the Ards Peninsula, which at its widest point, between Strangford Lough and the sea, you're looking at 3 miles of width, and we have I think 58 acres of barley fields along that peninsula. So there does be that sort of salinity, that salt air across the barley, and particularly with our malt, our single malt liquid, you do get that salinity, or a bit of an umami sort of element coming off the back of it. And again, that's that's the terroir too. You know, it's where it's located at. It's the sort of microclimate of Echlinville and on the Ards Peninsula, where it doesn't really see any huge heights or lows, whereas sort of more inland does, temperature wise. So no, it's pretty cool. I do have a bottle of our new Mick pot still there if you want to try it and experience that for yourself.
We might try it later on.
We're not going to do it here now. We're currently working. You know? We've been very well behaved.
They're paraprofessionals, all right.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads kind of nicely into the reason, I suppose, why you're sitting in Peggy's parlour this evening, other than the podcast, is we're about to do a Dunville's tasting, right? And Echinville and Dunville's, I suppose, kind of go hand in hand. They're almost inseparable at this stage. You know, I mean, it's one would almost forget or be forgiven for forgetting that Dunville's was a brand of its own, existed for so long, obviously died off, and has been resurrected, right, by Jarlath and by Echinville. I mean, maybe tell us a little bit about that, because that's a really interesting story.
That's a class one, and what you're saying there, you know, Echinville and Dunville's going hand in hand, like they really do, and like there's times that, you know, there's bars I'm dealing with, you know, they refer to me as the man from Dunville's or whatever, and I go in with like an Echinville jumper on, and they're like, "Oh, did you change jobs?" I'm like, no, fuck, like. But again, it's you know, over the last few years we haven't really told the Echinville story. We've talked about Dunville's, and again, that's once we acquired the brand, like we knew from day one, like we need to do justice to this brand. We need to revive it properly. And like if you look at our single malt bottles, you know, that green glass, that same design of label, being a double distilled malt, being, you know, well, it was full sherry maturation back in the 1800s. So that's why we do a very large sherry influence on it now, but it's reviving the traditional sort of brand of what it was, but sticking to that and honouring it. So again, we spent the last, you know, 12 years, 13 years preaching Dunville's and trying to get that back on the pedestal of sort of in the league of whiskey where it used to sit. Meanwhile, Echinville, you know, been working away laying down liquid. And this year being the 200th anniversary of the formation of Old Cumber from 1825 to now, this is the year we release our pot still under the Old Cumber banner, and we really do sort of scream the Echinville message out this year. Yeah.
Well, you know, and I suppose just I'm really back from Belfast. I was recently up in the last kind of maybe couple of weeks, and
you had a great time.
You know what? It's a great city, right? It really is. Like, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it was probably second to Limerick, you know. But I mean, that's just what it is. But it's amazing as you go around quite a number of the bars and the prominence of the Dunville's labelling, merchandise, mirrors.
Yep.
You know, and this isn't new produce. This is heritage, vintage stuff. Like, so I mean, it just goes to show that the Dunville's, you know, up that side of the world was huge.
Yeah.
Really, like, you know. I mean, how you kind of glanced on it, and you kind of touched on it. How do you do it justice in the way that you are, like, and how do you? Because it has to be expensive. It's not cheap to do it justice, you know.
It is, and again, most answers here I'm leaning back to Jarlath, but like to sort of explain him his role a wee bit, which answers that question. You know, he's the financial director. He's an accountant by trade, but he's also one of the biggest whiskey geeks and lovers and historians you'll ever meet. So like, you know, with Dunville's, we're getting fantastic casks. We're getting really good base liquid to start with. We're letting it sit for a lot longer and getting bigger age stuff and bigger finishes. Where, you know, a lot of other brands, the FD might be telling the people in charge of the whiskey to release it sooner, to use the cask a couple times to, you know, get money back into the business. Whereas, you know, when Jarlath's having that internal struggle with himself and his demons, the whiskey wins. So
yeah, but I think it does come true, because you can see this at times there is thought. At times, you know, we understand it, and sometimes I wonder if the general public understand it, that to do certain activities costs a lot of money, and the return really isn't there. So you're doing it just because it's the right thing to do. You know? Now, I mean, I'm going to ask a daft question I haven't asked of anyone else thus far. I probably won't ask again. But has Jarlath got it wrong at any stage, or do we want to pass that one by?
You know what? See, like, as far as liquid goes, all been great releases. You know, you've some of the single cask, the green label stuff here, and the rest of it too. Like, liquids have all been great, in my opinion. All been great. You know, some things we've sort of went arse about foot with it, and, you know, maybe a longer process, more costly process than it needed to be, but there is that sort of that perfectionist element to a lot of stuff at Echlinville, which, you know, it's not going to bring you the most profit all the time, but it is worth its weight in gold as far as, you know, that name, and people know there is the integrity with it.
I suppose it leads into kind of another question, is like Dunville's range is known for kind of bold casks and cask finishes and stuff. So what kind of thought process goes behind that? Is that jar, or is it a kind of a combination of
that was a bit of everybody, when
Yeah.
we're trying to pay respect and everything to the history side of Dunville's. Like back then, it was full sherry maturation.
Yeah.
That's what Dunville's was. Like you look at our old Cumber whiskey. Cumber was predominantly port, about 2/3 port, 1/3 sherry, and we stuck with that with our pot still. But for malt, it's the sherry casks. We started off with the PX10, did it really, really well. We've expanded into Oloroso and Palo Cortado as well now. A couple of different, all PX and Palo Cortado. I think we're pretty well ahead of the game as far as getting those casks, and like whenever we were bringing them out, they'd spent 3 or 4 years in those finishing casks. We bought them and laid them down well before. So look, they're big casks. If you look at any of the green glass Dunville's bottles, you can be sure of a couple of things with it. So it's always going to be a first fill cask. It's always going to be a smaller barrel, and it's always going to be a big long finish. So we don't use sherry butts. We use sherry hogsheads. So you look at most places, the proper sherry places in Spain, most of them, they don't want to get rid of their butts. Their Solera systems they're reusing every 80, 90, 100 years. They're getting better as they go. So we looked at a different avenue, and we got was, at times you find damaged Solera barrels. We get them reconditioned by Cooperage in Scotland into hogshead size using the good remaining staves. So you're getting a smaller cask with better liquid to wood interaction and ratio, and you're getting first fill. The last thing in there would be the sherry itself, and we're getting it the lengthy finish that it deserves.
You kind of mentioned a few. What's your favourite, I suppose, Dunville's release? Or even let's just your favourite release from Echlinville. Just doesn't have to be the Dunville's brand.
Who's your favourite child?
Come on, answer it. Sorry, it's James Thompson here on one side. Yeah.
Look, as far as all around standout product, it's at the right price point, and it's different, and it's big. 10-year-old Palo Cortado, to the point where I recently got a new license plate from a car. We're allowed the UK, the England sort of reg is in the cars up there, so mine says PC10DUN.
You know what? That's taking it too far now. Obviously, this promotion has gone straight to rage. Yeah.
You've paid way too much.
Jarlath has PX20 done on his personal car, and Shane, the owner, has PX12 somewhere on it. And I was like, I would love 21 Palo Cortado in the car, but the car's not fresh enough to get that. Yeah. So went for the 10-year.
I suppose just you're driving on the whole time, right? And you seem to kind of have the future to mind. I mean, what's next for Echlinville, or what's next for Dunville in terms of projects or exciting casks or exciting whiskey?
So, Dunville's, we've established that pretty well. People know what to expect with Dunville's, and that's great, and we'll continue to do that. And a big thing for us has always been working with iconic whiskey bars and shops and everything, both in Ireland and globally too. I'm sure you're sort of familiar now at this point with the 1808 cask and bond series that we've done. It was a mindful thing too, sort of beautiful accident of working with the guys in Dick Max and getting a couple barrels sent down for them to fill with a honey and hemp IPA from their own brew house, and back up to us to mature the 1808 blend and to bring out as limited, a really experimental, unusual sort of style bottle in partnership with an iconic venue. So it came at a great time. We ran that right through into a series now because people don't have the same money to spend on whiskey as they did coming out of COVID and even before that. So a bottle that sits under the €100 mark, and it's the bar can have their own. You get a glass next to your pint that's not going to break the bank. We've got the Maddens one here in front of us tonight. We're going to have the Garrick earlier on, a couple of pubs you were in Belfast yourself recently.
Yeah.
I think we actually planted a Limerick barman in one of them pubs for you.
Michael, yeah. Michael, yeah. I met him in the Garrick, yeah. Great guy. It was actually
he was called Limerick Michael. I think
Limerick
Mick.
Yeah. It was an interesting story. With myself and James, typically when we leave Limerick, we don't get recognised a huge amount, but you do every now and then. And walked into the Garrick on a Friday evening. Real busy bar, absolutely fantastic vibe. The More Than Our Own here was great to walk in. Their point was absolutely savage, and there was this guy from behind the counter just kept staring at me. And you're kind of going, oh God, what did I do, right? And we stayed for a couple of drinks. Myself and Cora stayed for a couple of drinks, and we went back on Sunday because we said it'd be a little bit quieter. We'd actually be able to sit down and chill out and just relax. And, we were sitting at the bar, maybe more than ourselves, a little bit quieter. Ideal. And next thing, this head came from around the corner. Well, Mush, what part of Limerick are you from? Wow, okay. And yeah, look, great guy, absolutely wonderful conversation, and you know, it's a really interesting story, like how he ended up in Belfast and the Garrick. Yeah,
I stopped in the Garrick after a gig there on when it wasn't, maybe one Monday night.
Yeah.
And he was working away and I was chatting. I was like, well, I believe you had a Limerick couple up with you recently. He goes, geez, we've had loads of them up. Lately. He's like, a publican. He's like, oh yeah, one of the boys taken over the Roundhouse. That's the old name of the pub. Yeah. So no, he was good crack. He was saying he had a good chat with you anyway.
We did. No, and look, you know what? That it kind of goes to look. You need Limerick people around the world, you know, just to spread the love, I think, you know, and that's the benefit of it. We're just meant for this trade, you know?
You're starting to think like a Cork man here.
Listen, we've been doing it for years, just not shouting about it, you know. You know, I mean, you're in the industry now a good portion of your life, right, in terms of your adult life and commercial life. I mean, if someone was starting their journey into Irish whiskey, into the industry, I mean, what bit of advice would you give them at this stage?
Just try things. You know, go out, try as many different whiskies as you can. Ask questions. Like if somebody gives you a bit of advice, like but I suppose with all walks of life, like somebody wants to give you advice, you don't have to use it. Take it on board. Don't shoot it down. If you shoot it down, that person's never going to offer you that sort of hand again. Ask what you can. Be inquisitive, and you know, because you're not going to learn otherwise. Like if you're going to be standing behind a bar, working an 8-hour shift, you can kill the time, or you can try and learn something and create experience and you know, develop yourself a wee bit within it too. So like just try things, ask questions, and be around the right people.
Excellent advice. Yeah, you know, as I mentioned, as I walked around Belfast, one of the things I noticed was the provenance of Dunvilles, and that goes back to the legacy and the tradition of it. But I mean, as you come, even just around Limerick, or we were in Cork at the weekend for the Whiskey Fest, as we walk around certain bars, you know, it's quite evident that there's a dominance in terms of the big brands, you know, and I mean, that doesn't always kind of allow the likes of Dunvilles into the market, you know, and as such, I suppose Dunvilles maybe doesn't get the mainstream recognition that it deserves, you know. Do you think they dominate that conversation too much in terms of Irish whiskey?
Yeah, yes, I know. I suppose, like, again, myself coming from the bar background, like, looking back on it now, and you look at, you know, the vodkas or the gins or whatever liquid it is that people are tied into having because some brand and some company in another country owns it, and that's what you're getting tied into pricing, and the smaller guys can't compete. And like, it's nice, like if you look at the pot sheen sort of resurgence at the minute, and the amount of bars often use pot sheen in their cocktails and stuff, you know, in place of tequila or in place of vodka, and you're going back to the native spirit and paying a little bit more but having that local offering and something a bit more quality. Like, there's a lot to be said for that, and you know, the likes of the venues and the bars that are you know, willing to pay that a little bit more and make a little bit less margin to do something a bit different and to offer that better product and experience. Those are the guys that we love to work with. You know, there's other places you go in and people are sort of looking to fight tooth and nail to sell them stuff and make no money on it. Like, that's not the gig.
And I suppose then, at least kind of to the next question, I mean, there's an awful lot of whiskey labels out there, you know. You know,
about 300 in this room.
And to be fair, a vast majority of them are actually produced in some form of a distillery that is owned by the label. You know, I mean, are we seeing too much of labels without the distillery, that gypsy kind of distilling, that purchasing brands? You know, is it diluting down the market a little bit?
That's another yes and no in my opinion. Like, there's some great brands out there that going down that avenue, you know, like look at like the Fox's Bow, for example, like class liquid, great people going about it their own way and creating their own identity, and like even being out in Texas there back in November time, like seeing how well they've sort of nailed the market over there and how well they've been received, that's class, absolutely perfect. Love to see a brand like that are in it. But at the same time, you know, you go to the States and you look at a shelf and you see all these, you know, gimmicky brand names and everything else, and somebody's never stepped foot in a distillery. They've created a brand, they want to make a buck, and you know, they're exporting to different countries because nobody here will be drinking it, and it's the same stuff, you know, it's taking up shelf space and keeping guys like Dunville's getting onto the shelves in other places. So yeah, there's a bit of both. There's good and bad in it, but I think with the amount of brands that have, you know, popped up over the last few years, there will be a bit of a stonewall for them at the end up. There'll be a few more won't last.
Just as you were talking, kind of what came to mind is like, and you're right, Fox's Bow is a lovely example. I look at Tome again, even Sailor's Home, but here you have I suppose, guys and girls who have a belief in the brand, who are 100% behind the brand, who have a passion about the brand, and while there is no heritage behind the brand, they're still creating their own story, as opposed to you know, just a label on a bottle as a commercial activity, and you're looking at a spreadsheet rather than talking about whiskey. You know, what's the bottom line? How much can we get it for, and how quick can we sell it? You know.
Like I said, there's loads of brands. Like, again, myself going globally to different markets and countries, and like, you do see an Irish whiskey label. It's on a shelf somewhere, and you're like, never heard of it before. You see where it's produced by, and you see an office address of who it's produced for, and you speak to somebody in the liquor store, and they're sort of saying like, oh, that's been there for years, can't shift it, don't know who to. There's nobody we can contact to get it uplifted or anything, you know. It's getting on the shelf and then not wiping your hands of it. You know, you've sold it, you got the money. That's not the way to go about it. But like, again, back to the likes of the Fox's Bow, like, it is, you know, modern brand, it's their own identity. I suppose a big thing for me, which I quickly learned within Echlinville, and you know, you Jarlath and Stephen and the likes, we were out somewhere, you know, we're getting each other bottles of whiskey at Christmas and stuff, and going out and we're trying other things. And if you have somebody involved in the whiskey world, especially ambassadors, hosts and tastings, and that, if the only whiskies they know or drink are their own, like,
well, you never learn. Like, it's like a barman. It's like behind the bar as well. You have, like, as we said previously there, like, you have to kind of learn. You have to kind of ask questions. You have to try new things. You have to sample. So and that's how you kind of that's how you learn and get better at your job, I suppose.
Like, if you're going to work on whiskey, you need to understand not just one brand. Like, you know, whiskey from different nations and different styles, and you have to have an idea what you're talking about.
Well, I suppose in that sense, then it actually you can get ideas for your own whiskey. It kind of goes it goes hand in hand that way.
I'm on record as saying that because I want to be able to expense a load of fucking different brands. Like,
well, I mean, you know, just I suppose, if you're going to upsell your whiskey or translate a customer across, of course you need to be able to talk about tasting notes, etc.
Yeah,
so
like
it'd be in Jarlath's interest to fund you a nice little whiskey bar at home.
I hope you're listening,
or a decent expense account.
But that's true. Like, you know, like,
if he wants to set up an expense account here, look, we'll bill him every month there.
You can just get a B&B wrapped into it somewhere.
We'll put you in beside Gilooly there, it'll be grand. No fear.
Adam would be mighty jealous.
No, we won't go there.
But no, like, again, like, you know, there's whatever amount of lads or people are coming down here tonight for this tasting. Like, there are people who like their whiskey and they try loads of different stuff. If I only know Dunville's, how do I talk to them and try and, you know, teach them about our stuff if I don't understand everything else? So
no, and look, agreed. And you will get questions now this evening from the guys and girls that will be in attendance, like who are at this stage, like, you know, we've done quite a number of tastings in this room, right? And you know, an Oloroso or an Oloroso cask is not an Oloroso cask. You know, as you clearly said, there's differences. So that will translate through the liquid. Like, so it's beneficial at times to be able to have that conversation to say, this is why. You know, and that knowledge. I suppose, you know, if Dunville's was still around, if it hadn't shut down, would it be as big as the likes of Redbreast or Powers?
So, well, who's a travelling sort of journalist or whiskey historian, I suppose. Alfred Bernard wrote a fantastic book, and I think it was 1887 it was released, from his 85 journeys, and within that, you know, he records the outputtage of liquid coming out of the Royal Irish Distillery, where the Dunville's family owned and operated, as being the biggest whiskey producer and stockholder in the island of Ireland or Scotland.
What was the percentage, can you remember?
Oh, I need to look that one up. It was whatever was it, because again, I think within Belfast at the time, it was the biggest whiskey producing city. I think something like 66 or 70% of whiskey produced in Ireland was coming out of Belfast. And off that, you know, you had 3 or 4 sort of large distilleries doing the bulk of it, but Royal Irish was the largest.
We're going to fact check him on this now. We've read the book too. 9% of the world's whiskey was actually produced out of Limerick.
9.
Whether you realise it, that's world whiskey, not just Irish.
What period would that have been?
That would have been up when he wrote the book. That was the 9% of the world's whiskey came out of what was the Brownstein or Walker's Distillery, whatever way you want to call it. There's numerous names on it over the years. You know, so we're going to fact check that just so you know we'll come back with the answer to that. Not that we're doubting you, right?
In the modern day, 9% of the world whiskey is consumed in Limerick.
In fact, if we really go into it, right, probably of that 9%, you know, I would say nearly 99.999% of it left Limerick, because it was owned by a Scottish family. It was made by Scottish hands. They brought 86 employees from Scotland and their families over. So there wasn't actually a Limerick hand involved in the making of Limerick whiskey. It was just the location was absolutely wonderful. It was just on the River Shannon. You know, it's really interesting stuff. Like, but yeah, that whiskey would have left here very, very quickly. Would have been destined for the UK, the Americas, India, wherever it would have gone in terms of trade routes. But yeah, it's quite cool. But it's interesting, right? Because you are the fourth person in as many days to talk about Alfred Bernard. You know, and it just goes to show, right, that like
the book is out there.
The book is out there.
People are reading it.
People who are into whiskey are into their history as well. Like, and
100%.
you know, and that they are historians in terms of reading up around it and having the knowledge too, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, like, I mean, you look at the likes of stuff that Fionn O'Connor does, and you know, looking back into the archives and getting the history and the truth and finding out all this stuff. Because again, like I work for brand myself. Like, brands can stand in front of somebody in a room and spin the most beautiful story. But you know, that bit of work and actually figuring out the truth and uncovering stuff. Like, whenever we released our Port Morant single cask, there was a lovely little book that we created to go in there, and Anne-Marie, our marketing manager, spent 6 months going through libraries and archives and everything else to check everything and put this together. So again, it sort of circles back to the start. We're talking about doing justice to reviving the Dunville's brand and the legacy and the name and continuing that. So the history's class.
In a really interesting fact, we bought that beautiful whiskey. We put the box on top of a shelf here in the parlour, and as we were cleaning one afternoon, we didn't realise there was a mirror in the back of it, and it came down top of us. Now, thankfully, it didn't get damaged.
No,
it's now hanging on the wall
there.
But it was only after someone said, people were buying the whiskey for the mirror. We didn't clue the mirror was even in there.
So you said with all the old genuine Dunville's mirrors around Belfast. I think. I don't know if this one's true or not, but I heard this before that Dunville's were sort of one of the first brands to produce branded mirrors and send them around bars, and you still see a few of them around America and that too. But in the whole time that we've had the brand, that's the only one that we've ever produced.
Oh wow! Okay.
So we don't get asked all the time. People want them, and we don't want to be the guys behind reproductions and whatever. If the originals were such a significant thing, so we did include a mirror in the inside of the lid of the case for the Port Morant release, and it was if you look at it, you'll see we still have whiskey without the E there, as it would have been originally, and that's the only one we've ever produced, and the only way to get your hands on it is with a pretty pricey bottle of whiskey.
Yeah, it was a really interesting conversation. It's a conversation piece now, you know, and anyone that kind of comes into the parlour who knows us knows that it fell down on top of one of us, you know, and then there is a little dent on the bottom of it on the frame, but it didn't break, thankfully, so it's still good. I suppose just finally, right, because when we were talking just before this, right, we were talking about the price of whiskey, and you know, we're talking about whiskey production and a little bit about that, and how you know, some of the big guys are actually slowing down and stopping production for a period, and we seem to be overproducing now. I mean, premium whiskey has gone through a huge resurgence, right? And we see that. You know, we see it here in the counter. People are willing to trade up and spend a little bit more. But I mean, are we getting to a stage maybe that's starting to become overpriced and out of the reach or the range of the ordinary person? You know, as they come into a bar, not necessarily talking about home, but just as they come into the bar.
Oh, yeah, there is. Like, I mean, there's some whiskies are a ridiculous price. Now there's a lot of great whiskies that are a high price ticket, and you know they are worth it, but it's not something you expect everybody to try. And I suppose that's part of the beauty of having the likes of tastings like this, where we're having 20, 21-year-old stuff here tonight in the tasting. It's a lovely way to go about it and get people trying it. But like for me, even within our own range, I know years gone by, like sort of our single casks, the 19 to 21-year-old sort of stuff was probably the most prominent and popular. In recent years, we started doing some younger ones, you know, like 11, 12, 13-year-old single casks, and to me, like those liquids, they punch above their age. They did one in December there for Stitch and Weave up in Derry City, and it's probably one of my favourite single casks we've ever done. And like, you know, it's half the price of a lot of the other releases we have, and stuff like that. And again, with the 1808 Cast and Bond series, again, we're realigning what we're doing, releasing less of the older stuff, and trying to, you know, to work with alongside iconic pubs and that, but also to have a nice, accessible, affordable whiskey. Because that's what it's about. Like, you don't need to.
I suppose it's about a point in a whiskey at the bar counter, really, isn't it? That's what it comes back to.
Like, end of the day, you have a bottle of whiskey on a shelf. Like, if somebody have one glass and then can't afford another one for another 3-4 months, that's grand. They've tried it as an experience, but it's not what you want. You want somebody to, for your brand to be their favourite whiskey, something that they want to drink another one off, that to be the whiskey you want to drink next year pint on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and I suppose we've a little bit of saying here in the house at times, so good whiskey doesn't have to be expensive. And great whiskey is always cheap.
Yep.
Even no matter what you pay for it. Because it's great, right? But so it's a really interesting one. Look, on that, I want to say a huge thank you. Number one, the fact that you're here in Limerick tonight. Number two, the fact that you actually took the time to sit down and have a conversation like this. This is hard, right? This is not everyone is willing to do this, right? And I suppose the whole idea of this is that it goes a little bit beyond those that are programmed to do this. Like the distillers are all trained and they'll talk all day and they're polished and refined, right? This is a little bit more gritty, earthy, and it's on the ground, right? And we don't normally hear on podcasts from the ordinary man and woman or whatever gender you identify as, who are out there actually selling the whiskey. So huge thanks for being here in Limerick, thanks for being here in Mother Max and Peggy's Parlour for myself and James.
Boys, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I would like to thank Séamus Óg for his candour and willingness to discuss all things whiskey. Here's to every cask, the craft and the conversation. May every pour be a story and every story a memory. Please remember to join us for our next episode when we invite Master Distiller Paul Corbett of Powerscourt Distillery into the parlour. Until then, cheers to the whiskey that brings us together, one sip at a time.